This episode brought to you by TAUMMHOMS, which is a natural sleep and sound healing portal helping people globally to get to sleep faster and stay asleep longer through TAUMMHOMS.com. That's www.TAUMMHOMS.com.
It's My Right Stuff with your host, Grammy Award-winning record producer and inventor, Toby Wright. My Right Stuff is brought to you by TAUMMHOMS, a natural sleep and sound healing portal available globally at www.taumms.com. That's www.taummmhoms.com. And I'm your announcer, Grinnin' Barrett. Here's Toby.
Hey, I'm Lord Toby Wright, and this is My Right Stuff News. All right, and welcome to the My Right Stuff, a Good News Network. Let's kick things off with the music news. Johnny Marr released Fever Dreams Part 3. The EP features 4 brand new songs from Johnny Marr's anticipated first double LP, The Speed of Love, Night and Day, Counterclock World, and Rubicon. Timed well to follow Johnny's live run with Blondie, the EP will be released on limited edition gold vinyl with 2,500 units available worldwide. Wow. Well, Things Are Great is the first full-length release from Band of Horses in 5 years. Skyscraping choruses and tender feelings are expertly navigated along with some crunchy guitars and Ben Bridwell's beautiful voice. Well, Tears for Fears release The Tipping Point. The British pop rock duo worked with Charlton Pettis, Florian Reuter, and Sasha Skarbek on its first full-length studio release in 17 years. And for all you Tears for Fears fans, you should really love this one because it's really good. Well, Zealand Ardor releases their self-titled full-length record. Led by Swiss-American musician Manuel Gano, Zealand Ardor are ahead of the curve when it comes to creating music that knows no boundaries. The eccentric yet wildly intelligent mix of black metal, blues, soul, and electro is something that will leave listeners surprised and most certainly entertained. Let's go on over to the film and TV news. Well, Space Force Season 2 is on Netflix. Space Force has struck well with its second season after getting off to a pretty rough start. Reuniting Steve Carell with The Office showrunner Greg Daniels, the series follows the 6th branch of the United States Armed Forces, known as the Space Force. It premiered in 2020 and was met with reviews that were a little less than stellar, but Netflix committed to the series by ordering a second season, and fortunately, that has turned out to be much more well-received. Well, Netflix also premieres Vikings Valhalla, and it's a follow-up series to Vikings, and it's set 100 years afterward and centering on the adventures of Leif Erikson, Freydis, Harold Hardrada, and the Norman king, William the Conqueror. Well, The Desperate Hour hits theaters today, and it's about a recently widowed mother, Amy Carr, played by Academy Award nominee Naomi Watts, and she's doing her best to restore normalcy to the lives of her young daughter and teenage son in their small town. And as she's on a jog in the woods, she found her town thrown into chaos as a shooting takes place at her son's school. Well, miles away on foot in the dense forest, Amy desperately races against time to save her son. Wow. I get chills just thinking about that one. Well, Studio 666 is out now. The members of the rock band Foo Fighters move into a mansion to record their 10th album. Once in the house, singer Dave Grohl finds himself grappling with supernatural forces that threaten both the completion of the album and the band members' lives. In the vein of the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night, Studio 666 looks to be a lot of fun and very entertaining. Well, let's go on over to the world of sports. Well, in Formula One news, with the first race of the season only 3 weeks away, Haas and Alpine debuted their new 2022 cars. The first testing for all the cars took place this past week in Spain at Catalonia, where Ferrari had the fastest time. And in IndyCar racing, the 2022 season begins this weekend at the Firestone Grand Prix, St. Petersburg, Florida. Well, look out for Colton Herta, Helio Castroneves, and IndyCar has a female driver again, Tatiana Calderon, a 28-year-old Colombian who will be driving the number 11 Chevrolet for AJ Foyt Racing. Look out for her as well. Wow. Well, in Premier League, leaders Manchester City play Everton. Liverpool play Arsenal, and Chelsea take on Leicester City. Let's go on over to the gear and tech news. Lewitt has come out with the LCT 1040. The company describes it as the best sounding and most versatile microphone ever built. 4 all-analog tube characteristics: clear, warm, dark, and saturated. Well, it developed in close cooperation with Grammy-winning studio professionals. A detachable remote control for unrivaled workflow, blendable FET circuit, and seamless polar pattern control. It also comes with a high-performance magnetic pop filter that protects your capsule from unwanted transients and moisture. It lists at $34.99 and comes with a 10-year warranty. And you can find Lewitt here. And finally, sad news. The world lost a wonderfully talented musician this week, Mark Lanegan. And he passed away this week at the age of 57. The gruff-voiced singer fronted the Screaming Trees. The group scored top 10 hits on Billboard's modern rock chart with the singles Nearly Lost You and All I Know. During his time in the Trees, Lanegan launched a concurrent solo career, beginning with the 1990s The Winding Sheet, an album that featured guest appearances by Nirvana's Kurt Cobain and Chris Novoselic, and frequently making guest appearances with Queens of the Stone Age and Peter Hook and the Light, and many more. Lanegan is survived by his wife, Shelley. Oh, rest in rock, my friend. We will all miss you. Well, that's all the news that's making the news this week, Friday, February 25th, 2022. And now over to you, my lord. Oh, hey, thank you, Toby, and welcome back to My Right Stuff, which is a film, TV, sports, music, adventure, and inspirational lifestyle podcast. I'm your host, Lord Toby Rage Wright, as they like me to say. And today, we have an awesome show for you. A guest who is an amazing record producer, musician, and teacher. He's worked with some of today's best artists, like 9 Inch Nails, Perfect Circle, Marilyn Manson, and his own band, 8mm. His name is Sean Beavan. But before I introduce him, I want to thank you, all of our supporters who stream, download, watch, and support My Right Stuff. Please keep spreading the word, my friends. We really, really do appreciate it, and it really does help. And be sure to click on our show notes below to follow our link tree for a full list of all the channels we stream on, as well as all of our sites and social media platforms. If you'd like to donate to My Right Stuff, please follow our support link. Every single dollar helps the My Right Stuff crew who make all of this possible. And it should be right above my head right now. Anyway, of course, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as the podcast channel of your choice so you never, ever miss a single episode. And after this episode, please head on over to myrightstuff.com, click on the store tab to pick up some snazzy merch for those lovely bodies. And that would make an ideal present for your nearest and dearest. You know, get them now because, woo. And before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to introduce my co-host, the man who has not produced a single record ever, but has bought every one that Sean and I have produced. My distinguished co-host, Sir Gareth Titan. Hey, Gareth, tell us about some new music you've been checking out this week.
Hey, Toby, my friend, I have been checking out new music, as I always do. I've been checking out a hip hop grime band from Swansea called Cryptic Elements. They're very, very good indeed. Also, an electric kind of trip hop band from Western Supermare called Episode 8. They've just dropped an album called In Hushed Tones, which is beautiful. My good friends Head Noise from the Valleys, who are like electro art punkers, they're pretty tasty.
Oh yeah.
And also the new Paul Draper album called Cult Leader Tactics, which is absolutely outstanding.
Oh wow, that's good. I'd like to check those out myself.
Yeah, I've been enjoying lots. Yeah, I've been enjoying lots this week.
That's awesome. Well, it's always a good week when you enjoy lots of good music, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah, very, very much so. Very much so.
Well, Gareth, I'd like to introduce you to our talented and very fun guest, Mr. Sean Beavan. This man has been at the helm of some of today's most popular and culturally rich records by artists like Nine Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson, Depeche Mode, A Perfect Circle, and many, many others. I'm sure he's going to take us on a downward spiral, bad joke, and talk to us about some of the records in your collection, Gareth. And I hope today we'll learn how he did this and how you, our audience, may be able to learn from him directly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please give a nice, warm, My Right Stuff welcome to Sean Beavan. Hey, Sean, how are you today?
Pretty good. Pretty good. How are you guys?
Pretty good.
Very
and you,
good.
Gareth?
Very tasty. Very well indeed. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to meet Sean as well, man. I've got so many of the records that you've worked on. Well, actually, kind of between pretty much the pair of you, I think you pretty much take up the majority of my CD rack.
Good.
And Sean, before we get started, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Sir Gareth Dighton, as you've already been speaking with.
A fellow Welshman.
Exactly.
Pleasure to meet you. Yeah. Yes, indeed. That was going to be my first question, actually, because with a name like Sean Beavan, it's quite clear you have some Welsh heritage. Because that name definitely says you do.
Yeah, no way around it, really. Yeah, yeah.
No,
I didn't really, I didn't know that for most of my life because I thought I was Irish, because my family kind of came in from Ireland. I think the first guy was a priest that came to Baltimore and ran St. Mary's Parish or something. And I was in England and in Bath looking at the Roman ruins. And I started talking to this guy while we're looking at this ancient fireplace. And he said, yeah, you're a Yank from, And I said, yeah. And he said, he's Thomas Jefferson. He's a Welshman, And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right. And stuff. And he says, well, what, and I said, I'm Irish. And he said, well, what's your name? And I said, Sean Beavan. He goes, hate to tell you, lad, you're Welsh. And it turned out
Welsh,
he was right.
Like Sean Beavan, fella. Actually, greetings, my fellow Welshmen. Hoyle, it's a pleasure. It's actually a pleasure to catch up with you.
Well, Sean, here at My Right Stuff, we like to start kind of near the beginning. So you started your musical career playing for some bands in Ohio. Can we get a brief overview of how that all started?
Yeah, I mean, I started playing. I started picking up guitar at 11 years old because I wanted to play bass, but my parents said you can't play bass by yourself, so play guitar. So I picked up the guitar, started playing, and I was supposed to do a talent show with a friend of mine, and he was going to play guitar, or he was going to sing, and I was going to play guitar. And we were doing a song, "Where Did the Children Play" by Cat Stevens. And the day of the thing, this day of the show, he just chickened out completely. So he was like, "I'll play guitar, you sing." So I did it. I just started singing the song, whatever. And afterwards, the girls were all like, "Hey, Sean," and I was like, "Yes, I could do this. I will definitely do this." And that's how the career started. Really, I think I remember listening to the radio and being really interested in how. Not just, songs and how great songs were. And I love melodies and stuff, but it was also interested in how they were put together and how different artists made songs sound in different ways than other people,
Right,
listening to Paul McCartney as opposed to Pink Floyd, or, like what the vibes were, Alice Cooper was a big influence in me. I loved that, just, anything that made my parents angry. And
exactly.
And so I started paying attention to who kind of worked on the stuff, and Bob Ezrin had been involved in several records that I really liked as a kid. And so I just kind of started following, well, what is it that he does,
Right.
and so producing became like a real interest in my life. And I tried to figure out how I'm living in Cleveland. How am I going to, follow a career in this, thing and become a producer,
Right.
And there's, a couple ways you can work in studios, work your way up the ladder that way, or you could be a musician who ends up working with other bands too to help them make their records and stuff. So I kind of went the Todd Rundgren route of, make my own songs, do my own stuff, and then get to know all the musicians in town and work with them, as well. So I ended up loving both sides of the glass, and so I was playing with this band Nation of One, which was like kind of one of the big original bands in Cleveland, which had an amazing scene in the 80s. Tons of original bands. Everybody's kind of making money. People would come to see us play. It was really nice. And Trent Reznor was in the band Exotic Birds, and I was mixing them live. Okay. And, and so we became friends through that. And then one day I was trying to get him to play in my band, because he's the best keyboard player in town. And he said, he goes, I'm working on my demos now, so I really want to concentrate on that, but I'll come in and play keyboards for your stuff. And so he came in and played stuff, and it was so cool. Great equipment. Great. He just always had the latest anything,
Right.
And he came in and he was like, man, your stuff sounds really, really good. Would you mind mixing my demos? And I said, sure. I'll do that. Yeah. It's like, trade. We did trades for things, yeah. And so I came in to mix his demos. And I think the first one was like, maybe Kind of I Want To or Sanctified or something. And it was just like that. Oh my God, like this stuff is amazing. Right. And so those demos I ended up mixing became, were pretty much what Pretty Hate Machine became, so he ended up using those mixes for those demos to get signed to the record label that he got signed to. And then at the end I was like, I'll still do anything you want me to do, to work with this, because the music's amazing. And so he took me out on the road with him to mix and stuff. And so that's pretty much how everything happened,
right,
in a way.
Wow.
Fantastic.
I believe you worked on the huge hit called Hungry Eyes. That still gets a lot of airplay. It's still being used in a couple of adverts in the UK at the moment, including one for McDonald's and also one for cat food. So how on earth did that sort of come about?
Well, while I was playing with the bands in Cleveland, I was working at Beechwood Studios as a tape op T-boy,
Right.
And I was in a session, and my friend Jim, what was that?
You actually sort of got to start somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the best way to start, because you get to learn, so much from people, So, and I was playing in this kind of band that was, doing well in town and stuff. And I was in the session where Eric Carmen came in to do these demos for Jimmy Einer. And Jim DeMaine, who is the engineer, was sitting there, and Eric was talking to him. And he's like, I really want to get some kind of hotshot musicians from town to play on this stuff with me. Do you know anybody who could play, bass or guitar or whatever? And Jim just turned and said, well, Sean plays bass. And I'm standing at the tape machine, and I'm like, yeah. And he was asking about the bands and stuff. So, I came in and played, and he was offering it was the best money I'd ever gotten to play a session. It was triple scale. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I came in and I, sat down with my fretless bass, and he was like, ooh, playing fretless bass, that's pretty crazy, And so I started playing. He gave me a bar chart, and I was playing my way through the song, and I got to the bridge, and he had written the wrong figure. I think it was an F sharp. It was supposed to be F or something. And I hit the note that he'd written down, and it was, wrong, and I just go Eric, it's his mistake and stuff. And he was like, oh, fixed it. And then I played the rest of the song through, and it was only I literally played one take with that one little punch in. So it was probably the most money I've ever made as a musician. It was 5 minutes of work for, triple scale. So it was pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
But yeah, we ended up playing together for a while after that. And it was really nice. He was a great guy, super cool. I think that session I said to him, Go All the Way was my favorite song when I was 9 years old. He's like, fuck you, Sean.
Well, Well, you mentioned you toured the world with Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails, and I know that you also did it with Marilyn Manson. What was that like? And were there any others besides them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously those tours were, kind of phenomenons. I mean, like the Downward Spiral tour, just to be at Woodstock, with the 400,000 people going crazy and having David Letterman and Howard Stern talk about your performance. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And, Marilyn Manson with Antichrist Superstar tour, that was the tour that really, launched him.
Right.
And we went from playing, I think we're playing like clubs and theaters to playing arenas in one, in like a space of maybe 3 months. Yeah. It was really, really fast. Cause when we did Smells Like Children and did Sweet Dreams, it really launched it, really set it up to, happen, because they became pretty much staples on MTV at the time. So all the things were in place to make that happen and stuff. And before that, right before I joined the Nine Inch Nails tour, when the first big headlining, or not headlining, but opening tour where we played with Jesus and Mary Chain, I had been touring with Humble Pie, as playing bass for Humble Pie.
Okay.
On the Dinosaur Rock circuit in the U.S. for about 2 years. And that was freaking invaluable. It's I got to meet all these amazing players, like hanging out with the guys from Foghat backstage, and they're like doing barbershop quartet harmonies and stuff. It was just amazing. Like, and all these like kind of, 70s heroes, and the band Humble Pie at the time when I played with them, it was Jerry Shirley, the original drummer, and Charlie Huhn from Ted Nugent's Dove Like Gonzo, and Wally Stocker from the Babies and Air Supply. And so while we were touring, they just kept telling me all these stories about like where everything went wrong in their careers, like how the manager stole all the money, how the t-shirt guys ripped everything off, like, and it was pretty fascinating. And so they kind of like, it was kind of like rock school, they told me like what not to do, and what to do and stuff to have a long and kind of fruitful career. And it really was invaluable. I was super lucky, for that. Yeah. And then, in the middles of those, I toured with LA Guns, did a world tour with them.
Sweet.
During the Hollywood Vampire era, like 91-ish, toured with Jim Thirlwell and Fetus Incorporated. Which was freaking amazing. They're superheroes of mine in the industrial scene that I was a big part of and stuff. So it's like being able to tour with pretty much the Godfather, was pretty cool.
Yeah, hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, very much.
Yes.
You even sang backing vocals from the mixing desk. Now, besides Toby doing that with a band called Night Ranger, I've never heard of that before. Can you please explain a little bit about that for us?
Yeah. Well, I was a singer in the old days as well. So Trent and I knew each other that way as well. So when we were on tour, he kept saying like, why don't you sing background vocals with everybody, while we're doing it, you know what I mean? And we're in clubs, so it's not really a big deal. You're maybe, 10, 15 feet from stage, so you can sing without the delay and stuff. And so like it gave him the choice to be able to like lay back on the choruses when when everybody's singing background vocals and stuff, so he could rest his voice or whatever, because those days, you go out on stage and you do that kind of screaming, 7 days a week, it's going to get to you after a while, So that kind of worked out cool. And it was always really fun to do. And then as we kept going into theaters and arenas, he wanted me to keep doing it. So like there's all that delay, like you're 60 to 100 feet from the stage and you're like singing to an eighth note behind, So what we used to do is my assistant, Charlie, used to get on the console and I would throw on a pair of headphones and dive under the console. We built this little like doghouse for me. Okay. And I just dive into that and sing with the headphones on. So I'm singing in time or whatever. And Charlie's mixing the band while I'm doing it. So that worked out really awesome. So super fun. I mean, I always loved doing it, and, got caught several times by audience members, and they'd always laugh at you or whatever, and or they'd like be like, yeah, I saw that.
Exactly. I got caught too. There was a little club and some chick caught me. She's like, I know you were singing background. I could hear you. Like, no, you can't.
Or maybe she's golden ears.
Busted.
Like
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I should have hired her, actually. Shit. Missed my chance.
But it's super fun because you get to obviously, like what it's like when you're mixing front of house, like you're kind of like Oz behind the curtain, you know what I mean, like
right.
Making all these people jump up and down, or it's super fun, and then to also be able to join in doing something musically like that is really cool too. So
Yeah.
I just really enjoyed it. Made me feel like a part of the craziness.
That's perfect.
Yeah, I bet. I saw Nine Inch Nails at the London shows in May 1994, the Downward Spiral tour. Were you there then? And I do have to say that it was an incredible show. It was an incredible show. The sound was just incredible, and the whole production kind of blew me away. At that time, I'd never seen anything kind of like that, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, especially we were doing a lot of backlighting. So it had that cool spooky look as well, and the clouds of smoke.
It was, yeah.
It's funny that those forum shows, for me, it was a little nerve-wracking because standing with me at front of house was Flood and Alan Moulder.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
It's like,
wow.
yeah, that's real mentors, you know what I mean? Like, it was really cool.
Yeah.
Like, super fun shows, though.
Absolutely. They were fun to watch.
It was an incredible show. It was a lot of fun to watch. I remember the stage was like kind of like sort of dilapidated house kind of thing, and there was all kind of different elements to that. And of course they played with Pig and Troponin Pal, and Pig certainly upset lots of people because they appeared on stage. They had two crucifixes either side of the stage with a severed pig head nailed to them, and he came on stage and threw a bucket of blood over the first couple of rows of the audience. And I just remember the outrage as the bucket went and this blood flew, and you could just hear all these people swearing and cursing him.
Raymond was pretty awesome. Like, and it was funny getting those deliveries every day of like pigs' heads and buckets of blood. It was pretty cool. Yeah, Trent actually loved it too because it reminded us of when we were opening for Peter Murphy on the first, like it was the second leg of the first like big opening band slots that we had. We did Jesus and Mary Chain, and Jesus and Mary Chain went really, really well. It was great. The crew loved us. We all just got along amazing. And then when we went out with Peter Murphy, we got along with the band amazing, but the crew hated us. And part of the reason why was because Trent would come out every night and they'd just be covered in cornstarch, you know what I mean? And he'd start throwing water around the stage and stuff. And there was one night where our Mark O'Shea, our tour manager, couldn't get cornstarch, so he had to settle for flour, right? They put flour all over themselves. They're throwing water, and the whole stage was like pizza dough, you know. And the crew's like trying to clean up before Peter Murphy comes out. It was funny, and Trent used to do stuff because it's Peter Murphy, obviously. So you've got all these girls in the front row. They're all like just made up perfect goth, princesses, right. And Trent would come out and just start throwing water and beer on them, their hair would start falling down. And it was such a fun, such a fun thing. And I remember one day he got pizza, took it from the backstage and just started throwing slices of pizza.
Oh, man.
Plenty of audience. They see it as like perfect goth eyeliner guy, with his clove cigarette or whatever, and pizza sliding down his face.
That's fabulous.
That's awesome.
Well, I know you have lots of stories.
I just wanted to say. Sorry.
Go on, Gareth.
I wanted to say as well that I was just going to comment that "Closer to God" is one of my favourite remixes from that era of kind of Nin, and I play that many times on my radio show. I even played it last night on actually kind of a show I did,
nice.
just to kind of get me in the zone for like kind of now and today. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for actually your work. Really, it's it's by like kind of us fans, it's very much appreciated.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite remixes of all time. And it was funny, we bought a stupid little Casio CZ something drum machine, and we sat there and just started running stuff through preamps and stuff to sample the drum sounds on that. So all of them were made right before we started doing the thing with that little sampler. It was really cool. And then I love that the Mini Moog rambling bass part, that's the main part of it. Like that just set the whole tone for what it was going to become. And then at the end, Trent was like, I want the end to start distorting and kind of fall apart as it goes, but not change volume or not do anything, just kind of move like that. But I don't want it to get too reverby and whatever. And he's like, figure out how to do that, So like I was just racking my brain. And I kind of remembered that, like when you use Neve modules and you start with the microphone and you run line stuff through it, as you turn up the microphone levels where it starts to distort, it also starts to clip and gate. And I just thought that's going to be the great thing. It'll keep it punchy, keep it, popping. And so I just would take the mix and I'd run it through different levels of that thing. So it just get more and more distorted, more and more clipped, more and more gated. And then cut it all together in Pro Tools. And then, did the volume stuff to make it seem like it just
happened.
Does it all by itself, without actual gain changes or whatever. And so it was a lot of editing, a lot of those ideas, but like it's one of my favorite things I've ever done, really. Like, and I feel really proud about it because it's like I came up with the whole idea myself and got it done, which is cool.
Nice.
And that's what happens.
Wow, an old-fashioned ringer.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mom's on the phone.
She was. Yeah. Yeah, you got to have the new, the old ringer for the old folks and the new ringer for the new folks.
Exactly.
Hey, well, Sean, you've gone on to work with some incredible artists and some of my favorite artists. Is there any sessions you're particularly fun you want to talk about or challenging that were like, as a producer?
Yeah. Some of the fun sessions, because, like when I worked with Axl, when we were doing the beginning parts of Chinese Democracy,
right.
When I came in there, they had been working for maybe a year or so, year and a half. And it had gone from the original Guns N' Roses lineup kind of like, and then everybody just kind of kept dropping out.
Right.
And, so it was like one of those things where he finally got a lineup that he really liked, which was the Tommy Stinson on bass, Josh Freese on drums, Dizzy on keyboards, Paul Hughey, one of his childhood friends, playing guitar with him, and Robin Fink playing lead guitar. And Robin was a real close friend of mine from the Nails tour and stuff. And Billy Howerdale from Perfect Circle he was just starting Perfect Circle at the time, like kind of writing stuff on his own. Right. And he had set up a kind of MIDI studio in the studio. We were at Rumbo Recorders. And so Axl used to go in and like kind of work with him, and they'd come up with these cool like trip hoppy ideas and stuff. And so I knew Robin and I knew Billy, and so that was cool as like old friends, And then when I met Tommy Stinson, he and I became really close really fast. Like, so it was like quick family, really, you know what I mean? And we're pounding through songs.
Yeah.
We did like 35 songs in 4 months, I think. And Axl and I got Axl to sing on about 15 of them. But getting Axl to sing is not easy because his life is so complex. Every day he gets up, there's all kinds of, fires to put out and blah, 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 So and it's that thing of trying to get him to sing was, super challenging. But I really loved him. He's such a great guy. And the best part about working with him when he'd come in to do vocals, he wouldn't warm up like normal guys. Like normal guys come in and they do their, kind of stuff. He'd come in, get in front of the microphone, and then do stand-up comedy for like 45 minutes. And it was amazing. Like the guy knows every joke ever told. And when he does Sam Kinison, it's amazing.
Oh, I'd love to hear that.
Just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we
I'd
just
love
be
to hear
dying in the studio, like while he's doing his thing, you know, like trying to get out of just your side splitting, you know what I mean, and get back into like, okay, let's do the song or whatever.
Right,
But
right.
that was, I mean, you know, one of the greatest things where I'm sitting here, I'm with Axl Rose, and he's telling me these amazing jokes and doing his best Sam Kinison impression. It was just amazing.
That's
Yeah.
killer.
Yeah. So that was super fun, you know.
Right.
And like, you know, working with Manson in the studio, what was great about working with him was he, like, you had to work long hours, you know what I mean? It was all long hours, but he never expected you to work any longer than he did. Like, he was always there, always working, you know what I mean? And then when you wanted to take a break, like if you looked tired, he would be like, you know, all right, let's take some time off. Let's do, you know, go do something or whatever, you know.
Right.
Like really tied in, you know, keyed in, you know. I never felt like, you know, you've heard people tell stories about like working with Prince, where it's like they're there for 14 hours waiting for him to show up. And then he shows up, and of course he's incredible and amazing, you know, and you've got to work for another 12 hours while he comes up with, you know, 7 great top 40 hits or whatever. But it's like you're dead by the time you start, you know what I mean? And then, it was never like that. You know what I mean? It was always great like that.
That's
so,
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, you know, every musician has something that's incredible and unique about them, you know what I mean? And that's why you get involved in any of this stuff. You know, one of the guys I work with all the time, Jorgen Munkby, is like probably my favorite saxophone player of all time. Like he blends like John Coltrane and Ornette Coleman, you know, like, and it's just amazing watching him work. And then he takes that, which is a, you know, primarily jazz instrument, and then he just makes it total metal. You know what I mean? Can make, you know, can rip on a Slayer song, and it's incredible. You know what I mean? And it sounds like it's meant to be in the genre. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So I suppose on the flip side of that, I have to ask you: is there anyone that you wouldn't work with again?
Probably not that I
You're
talk
going to name names if you don't want to.
You know, I mean, there are people I wouldn't. There were artists at certain times in my career that I didn't want to get involved with just because of what it would take longevity wise. You know what I mean? Because like when you're working with Trent or working with Manson, you're kind of in a camp and you're there all the time, and you know what I mean. It's kind of expected, you know, that. And then there are other artists where you come in and you work for 2-3 months together and bang it out, you know what I mean, and make it happen, and then you go your separate ways and stuff. And I had done, you know, 2 in a row of Trent and Manson, and then by the end of that, I just didn't want to get involved in that kind of, you know, where it just takes that much of your time, you know what I mean, like that kind of thing. So I tended to stay away from artists that kind of require that kind of concentration, you know. Leave it to the younger guys. You know, it's like it's kind of good when you're young in your career, you know what I mean?
Amen. Well, later on, you know, you get to pick and choose, right?
Yeah, I mean, more, but you know, there were a couple of artists that it wasn't easy making that decision, you know what I mean? Because they're really talented, really amazing musicians, but it's like I just at that point in my life, I couldn't devote that kind of energy or that kind of time.
No, it's
you know,
perfectly
and so I know I missed
understandable.
out on making something great. You know what I mean? Like in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in 2005, you went on to form your own band, 8mm, with your wife, Juliet. Is there a big difference between making music for yourself as opposed to somebody else?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's, I think, it's one of those things where you kind of, you know, the hardest thing about making music for yourself, especially, you know, Toby, like, you know, it's like you're a great engineer, great producer. It's like you've got everything at your fingertips. You know what I mean? You can do whatever you want, you know, anything. And then you're like, well, but what is it I want to do? You know what I mean? Like, because you kind of, in order to be creative, you kind of have to limit yourself, right? Like, you know, it's like you know, John Lennon, you know, it's like, because he wasn't like steeped in production techniques, it made him do things a certain way. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Where like Paul, you know, was steeped in production techniques and did things his way. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it informs you and does that stuff. And I just found that the thing that I wanted to do the most was kind of limit my palette so that I could really expand on it. You know what I mean? So it's like I did stuff like I'm only going to play a Gretsch guitar or a Telecaster guitar, and I'm only going to play an EBO bass, and I'm going to do real drums, but I'm going to cut them like they're loops, you know, and that kind of stuff where, you know what I mean? And like keep things kind of more organic. Like if I'm doing I'm not really going to do synthesizers, especially at the beginning. It was like only treated pianos, treated organs, that kind of thing, like to make it to just give it that kind of vibe. I wanted it to be a little slightly Americana, you know, like with British trip hop sensibilities, you know.
Cool.
And so
Nice.
and that was, for me, that was really cool because I'd been doing so much heavy stuff, and to be able to do something that was like quieter and more sparse, you know, and with Juliet's voice, where it was, you know, had this really beautiful vulnerability to it. It's like I wanted to keep that in the thing, you know. I didn't need someone belting, you know what I mean, and screaming. I needed someone who could really emote, you know, lyrics delicately, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that became exciting, and to be able to do something that I felt creatively challenging, as well as bringing up another side of myself artistically, was really cool, you know. So, and that's one of the things that it allows you to do.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Totally. Do you approach each kind of release kind of differently? Do you have a different mantra for it? Do you have a different mindset? Or I don't know, I suppose I'm trying to kind of figure out, are you driven by the same thing kind of each time, or with each record you've made?
Juliet just walked in, so I want
to
direct
cool.
this with
We
her.
can we actually can ask her that question.
Hi, Juliet.
Hi there. Hello.
How are you?
Hi, actually,
Good.
very nice to meet you. Good, thank you. How are you doing?
Good.
Okay, so he just asked us about.
I was just asking. Oops.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just asking Sean and actually now, of course, your actual good self. Do you approach each kind of release differently? Do you approach it with a different mantra and a different mindset?
Yeah, I think so. To an extent, there we kind of pick for Sean, you know, he picks sort of a palette of sort of instruments or sounds. So, you know, we don't get lost in you have all the options now. So we could be here for 1,000 years going through every sound. Every,
I can imagine,
know. It's not just ever, you know, one thing with him. It's like, oh, here's the Persephone, but then I could do 4 million things with it. So we have to limit things. And then
I need to be reined in. Yeah.
Yeah. So once we kind of decide on like a vibe or a mood, like Between the Devil and Two Black Hearts had this sort of PJ Harvey in the desert feeling that we wanted to go for. And the last one release, Heart Shaped Hell, we definitely want it to be more atmospheric and moody in a sort of cyber noir, you know, type thing. And I think we'll probably continue on that theme. So we generally kind of decide on, I guess, a palette.
Yeah, and we've always been, it's always been, you know, everything's always kind of connected to some kind of film thing, I think, is with 8mm, obviously named after film stock. So, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, but it's funny, like you can, like the last record, Heart Shaped Hell, was, I think, a pretty big departure. There was a lot more EDM-ish vibe, but it also kind of informed by what we were doing soundtrack-wise when we were making scores for movies and stuff. Right. With that like cinematic, atmospheric kind of stuff. But there's a lot more synthetic things and environmental sounds brought into it. But like, you know, the change from our record, Love in the Apocalypse, which I kind of wanted to be like our Carpenter's record. You know what I mean? Like super smoothly produced, these beautiful, you know, beautiful, clean sounds, you know. She was moving as a vocalist, and I thought she could really do some things that were kind of more in the way of Karen Carpenter with that like fuller voice and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so we started doing that. And that was a pretty big change. But like the change from that to Between the Devil and Two Black Hearts, it was like that thing of we decided that we wanted to kind of be, you know, the idea of like PJ Harvey and Led Zeppelin go to a rave in the desert, you know, and
That's awesome.
But the main thing for me, the main thing for me palette wise was I bought a, you know, $3 glass slide for my guitar, and that became like kind of the inspiration on everything, you know, alternate tunings and playing slide guitar. Like it was that thing of like, I kind of based it all around that. And that's kind of what gave it everything, that feeling of the Western desert, you know what I mean?
Right. Which is really
and so
cool.
that was a simple change compared to some of the other crazy stuff we've done before.
Right. Well, I know that, you know, all of the movie stuff led to some other work, particularly for Juliet, because you appeared in Gotham. Can you tell us what that was like and all about that?
That was so much fun. I was a lounge singer, and we did a cover. The gentleman who does the composing for the show wanted me to sing the "Love Is Stronger Than Death."
Okay.
So they did the track for that, and then I went into a studio in Burbank and a closet.
A closet.
A very small closet. I mean, it's, you know, it's a modern world, and.
Exactly.
And it was this cool, it just happened to be a very 8mm sounding version of it. So it was funny. So people were like, oh, you guys did that cover. It's like, oh, actually, no, I sang it. But he did this sort of down tempo trip hop version of Love Is Stronger Than Death. And then in New York, it was amazing. We actually shot, it's one of those things where we shot for probably an hour, all these different angles and all this different stuff. And I had this great dress on. And then you see the episode and it's on there for like 2 seconds. I was like, oh, dang. But, you know, Carol Kane hung out to, I was getting my hair done next to her in the makeup room. And I was kind of like, oh my God, they put me next to Carol Kane. This is amazing. And nice. She sat and watched. She wasn't in any of my scenes because they're somewhere, you know, their stuff was after, obviously they're the leads, but she sat and watched the whole time. And when I came down, she was like, grab me by the shoulders. She's a little bitty. She was like, that was the sexiest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, okay.
Oh, nice.
Okay. That's great. I
I'll
can take that. Yeah.
I'll actually take that. Yeah, very much.
Right. You know, so it was fun. It was fun.
That's great.
Sounds it.
Yeah. I think that composer had probably listened to some of our stuff, you know. He had listened to our stuff before because it seemed like he had grabbed stuff from our palette. You know? Yeah,
and the producer of the show, the main producer of the show, had licensed us before on some of his other shows, so we weren't unfamiliar to the crew.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you. That was awesome.
Our dog just decided she had to be in here. Okay, Frida. Thank you.
She just opened a studio door.
Oh, sweet.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
She's very pawsy. She's good with her paws.
My actual cat does that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't tell a cat what to do.
No.
No. I try daily, but it just doesn't work. I just wanted to say that you've actually done lots of film and TV scoring also. How different is that from a writing perspective for like a more traditional album or song release?
Well, it's like you've actually got we look at it like the dialogue and the story are kind of our lead singer, you know, and lyric.
Right.
So when you start, you're like, okay, we're the supporting band for what's going on, you know. So you and in different scenes, you know, the different actors, they speak at a different cadence, they speak in different pitches, kind of. So you kind of write around what's going on there too. So that kind of takes a lot of the pressure off when you're trying to figure out like what is this song going to be about or blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's already there for you. And you see what, you know, what the dialogue is, you know, what the scene is about. And then you try to be true to that scene and try to enhance the emotional content of it. You know, so every time it's like we're taking 8mm and we're joining a new band with, you know.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Because it's the story part of it's already there. You just have to support it and move it along and make sure all the beats happen. But
yeah, and that, you know, and since that's usually Juliet's forte in the 8mm stuff. She takes on the role of kind of the producer in a way, for me kind of doing most of the musical stuff. And then she does the production, and she's because she also like directs and does stuff like that with films. She has a great like ability to know what the scene needs, you know what I mean? And know when it's right, and know when I start trying to improve something and I'm screwing it up.
Well, a lot of times, it's that thing because I'm watching the picture and he's in Musicland, head down, studio troll. And I'm like, stop what you're doing. Look at him. Look at what he's doing. And you're over, and he's like, oh, you're right. It just needed the, I'm a genius. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm at this and at this and at this. And I'm like, no, look at his face, man. You're with him already. You didn't even know it. And
so she keeps that overall, like the big picture view, you know what I mean? And
exactly.
Which is so important, because you know how it is, Toby, you like bog down into the little filter settings and
minutia.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and that's part of the thing that's fun for us. I mean, I love the editing, and I love the the perfecting of things, but she keeps that thing of no, but you got to keep the spirit in mind. You've got to keep the emotion in mind.
Right. Well, I think that's a really good concept to keep in mind, because without the spirit and the emotion, you just have a bunch of notes, right, strung together.
Yes.
And somebody saying a lyric or two, like, oh, big deal,
And it's so nice to have, it's so nice when you're working with someone who takes that role so well, does that role so well.
Amen. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Juliet. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. I might go see what this dog is going on. Our dog was very unhappy with me right now. So she's very judgmental, so I should probably figure out what he's doing. All right, it's good to see you guys. Good to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
Very, very good to meet you.
Ciao.
Cheers, Juliet. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.
There we go.
Well, let's talk about your production techniques.
Oh, that was awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Very awesome. So let's talk about some techniques. Like, I have a bunch of techniques that I use, and I'd like to know about yours. And do they differ with each band, or do you like to use like a proven set of stuff, kind of like AKA Howard Benson? We all know what he does, and we know what Chris Lord-Alge does. And, if you run it through the template, right? And if it, to me, Chris is a great mixer, but he's lazy. I'll be fucking straight up. He's lazy. Okay. So I strip down the
tell it like it is, T.
Yeah, I am. Right. So I strip down the console. I start from scratch in every song that I do. Right. And there's no use in, putting the same drum samples in each one. And, you're going to get the same exact sound as you had on the last song, which might not even be close to what you're doing now. So, and that goes for recording as well as mixing. Right. So,
yes.
Those proven methods say one thing, but, for me, I'm a creative kind of a producer where I like to just start from scratch and, just go for it. Right. So can you tell me about some of your stuff and how you approach it?
Yeah, I think I probably do a hybrid thing. I'm more like you in that I like to approach each band differently, and I don't like to use the same techniques over and over again. I don't tend to use the same drum samples over and over again. Right. When I'm using samples to enhance stuff, it's either like I've processed this sample specifically for what this band's about. Exactly. You know what I mean? And this is gonna be their kind of signature thing, and it's not like anything I've done before. Right. I just don't like that stuff. You know what I mean? And not to say that I don't like it when I hear somebody else do it. It's like, I love Andy Wallace's mixes, even though it's the same snare drum on every song. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of thing, but the way he approaches stuff, the way he finds the niches for all the different instruments. I mean, he's just great at it,
Amen.
And he's great at what he does, and when you listen to Jeff Buckley's Grace, I mean, it's just,
you can't beat it.
That's his genius. You know what I mean? Like his approach to like how you bring chords out, you know what I mean? He wants to make sure you hear the third in that. So he's not scooping that mid range out of the guitar. You know what I mean? He knows what the notes are and what the frequencies are. And And all that kind of stuff makes a huge difference. You know, he's very musical in how he approaches what he does technically, right?
Right, exactly.
And Chris Lord-Alge is kind of the exact opposite of that, in that, you know, he's a slam bam, thank you ma'am kind of, you know what I mean? Like everything is extreme, everything is, you know, boom, boom, boom. You know, it's like, you know, in the studio with him, I'm sure there's 7 compressors that are sitting in a rack that are like, you know, $5,000 compressors that the knobs have never changed the entire time he's been mixing. You know what I mean? Like, it's like snare drum 2.5, you know, 2-to-1 ratio, and you know, goes down 6 dB, you know, and you know, it's like when you're looking at making a signature sound. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's Chris Lord-Alge's signature sound. You know what I mean? He like his kick drum is going to sound like this. His snare drum is going to sound like this. The balance of the kick drum to bass is going to be this. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Like there's just, you know exactly what you're going to get with him, which is great. It's like one of the reasons why you buy a Labrador, like a you know, full breed Labrador. You know what I mean? You know it's going to be like this with children. You know it's going to, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like. But you know, I'm a lovable mutt guy. You know what I mean? I like the personalities. I like the, you know, the weirdness. You know, blah blah blah.
Me too.
I don't mind doing songs that were recorded in someone's garage, you know, or someone's bedroom, or in a, you know, $2,000 a day studio. You know what I mean? Like it's like it all becomes its own thing. You know,
that's right.
And I've never only liked this kind of sound. You know what I mean? Like I like it all, you know, and I love albums to do that too, to kind of jump from thing to thing to thing and give you a little journey instead of it all being exactly the same, you know? And I mean, I've done my share of albums that sound, you know, every song sounds pretty much like the last song. And there's nothing wrong with that either. And it depends on what your client wants. You know what I mean? If my client wants a very, you know, like defined, like this is what we sound like, you know, it's working with Slayer, you know what I mean? It's like Jeff had to be in one speaker, Carrie had to be in the other speaker, never switch them, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like all that kind of stuff, you know, drummers has to be drummer perspective on the drums, like all, you know, very metal. And like I appreciate that too. Like that makes total sense to me.
Right.
And doing like Slayer, God Hates Us All, like I wanted to give them that thing, you know what I mean? I didn't want to change them too much, you know what I mean? I did some crazy stuff with Tom's voice, which was fun.
Right.
But you know, but it's like you give your artist what you want, and that's the main thing for me. It's like I want to be transparent. You know, I learned a lot of production technique from Flood when we were working on Downward Spiral.
Absolutely.
And like, you know, every day after the sessions, we get a pot of coffee and sit, you know, and watch the sun rise and talk about stuff about, you know, what you do as a producer. And Flood was really generative that way. And one of his main things was it's you want to be transparent as a producer.
That's right.
And you want to be a taste filter. You know what I mean? Right. You want your artist to feel like they can run things through you and have you tell them if it's cool or not. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And then they feel confident that it is because they know the things you've done. And they know that you've done cool things, whatever. But he like never wanted like a Nights Are Ebb record to sound like a Depeche Mode record, to sound like a U2 record. You know what I mean? And because he didn't want them to say like, "Oh, that's a Flood record," you know?
Exactly.
And and I don't really want that either. I want people to know it's a me record, because the bands that I work with, when I work with them, hopefully they have kind of a career defining record.
Agreed.
You know, that's the thing. Like when you listen to that record, you go like, that's kind of one of the, you know, that's one of the records you think about with that band. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
You know, and that to me, that's the reward, you know, and plus the coming up with cool ideas and on new ways to track stuff, you know. Don't always use the same mics on the same drums. Don't always use the, you know, like that kind of, don't always put the mics the same distance from the drums, you know.
Right.
It's like whatever kind of sets, whatever sets the mood, you know. It's like, why not use a Glyn Johns technique on this drum set, you know, for this thing? Or like I've done stuff where like on 8mm stuff, I did one of our songs. I just used a single Royer 121 microphone, sit in the corner of the room. You know, I found this great place where it sounded great on the drum set, and then I just threw the drums on the right-hand side of the mix. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's exactly what it wanted to be. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I love those kinds of ideas, you know what I mean? And I'll try to make that happen. You know, obviously sometimes there's time constraints and budgets and you can't get too crazy.
Right. Exactly.
And I've done my share of Howard Benson, you know, boom, 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 boom records, you know,
Sure.
all the drums recorded, you know, these 2 days, and then, you know, guitars on these 2 different amps and this, you know, 3 different guitars or whatever, you know.
Yep. Exactly.
And that stuff works, you know what I mean? Like, you know, it definitely, it gets efficient. And like when you work with Howard Benson, you know exactly what your band's going to sound like.
That's right. And if you don't,
and, you know,
paying attention.
So, yeah.
Exactly. There's value to that, you know, but if you want to be unique, you know, if you want to take chances, if you're looking for something that's signature, your sound, that's not the way to work, you know?
Correct.
Yeah. You want someone who's going to listen to you, like Toby will listen to the artist and then come up with cool ideas about how they can do something, you know, different and make it them.
Exactly.
And
that's
you know, that's
totally.
Yeah. And that's more my vibe too. You know what I mean? Obviously, you know.
Right. That's beautiful.
But I'm certainly not a purist about anything. You know what I mean? Like there are things I love about tape. There are things I love about digital. There's things that, you know what I mean? It's like I'll do all drum machine. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I'll do all drum machine and make it sound like a drum machine, or make it sound like a real drum set, or, you know, make a real drum set sound like a drum machine.
Exactly.
You know, like, yeah, I like all that stuff. You know what I mean? I kind of enjoy the juxtapositions too. Like I love taking a drum set and making it sound like it's like krautrock, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That shit's fun.
Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
Well, so tell us about your private record production tutoring company, or is it a company?
Mm-hmm.
And how can our audience members join in? And me too. How can I join in?
Well, it's pretty easy, you know, with what we have now with like the Skype or Zoom or, you know, these kind of situations. And especially because it's all stuff we've gotten used to during the pandemic.
Right.
It's like, it's so easy to work with people all around the world, you know. And my thing with this started working with Shining in Norway, and we would do stuff where it's like Jürgen and I would start writing songs, and he would write something, kind of demoed out, send it to me. I would listen to it, and then we'd go like, okay, let's meet on Skype, you know, on Tuesday, and go over this thing. And then I would come up with like my ideas. We'd go over them. We'd change some stuff or whatever. And then he would rewrite and read. And so by the time it was time to go into the studio, if the budget wasn't allowing like me to come into the studio, I could be there on Skype, you know, and he could leave like, okay, here's how I'm setting up the drums, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, make sure you put this over here and do that. You know what I mean? Like, and we kind of get our stuff together that way. And we ended up like being able to do so much cool stuff like that.
Right.
And so I started doing that with other artists. And then, of course, like all my artists, they're all like multi-talented, you know, engineer, you know, they do their own engineering, they do, but and part of my thing is like, you know, I'm only going to be able to work with an artist for a finite amount of time. You know, you can't work with them for, you know, a bunch of records, because eventually they're going to need something different, or they're going to, you know what I mean?
Amen.
Like that's, you know, I always look at it like, it's like you work for a period of time with someone and get them to where they need to go for the next thing, you know what I mean?
Right.
And you don't feel bitter like when they go to do something else, because everybody needs something else. You know what I mean? When they, you know, it's like, I need a glass slide on a record, or I need, you know what I mean? Like all those kind of things where it's like everything gives you, anything that gives an artist creative options, you know, is a good thing, you know?
Exactly.
So like when I'm working with guys, you know, I'm always telling them like, you know, if you want to make that rhythm section punch more, try this, even in the demos, like to kind of help, you know. Yeah. And so a lot of my guys have gone on to become producers as well.
Sweet.
You know, and mixers and getting better and better as they go. And that's part of the whole thing.
Right.
So it just makes so much sense to me to go like, you know, I should I should do like great guitar players do guitar lessons. Why don't I do mixing lessons, or why don't I do engineering lessons or producing lessons, working with artist lessons, songwriting lessons, or whatever, there's a lot of stuff I learned about songwriting that over the years, when you're working with great songwriters, you see the things that they do, the craftsman aspect of what they do, maybe not the artistry aspect, but the craftsman stuff. And you can impart that knowledge along. And a lot of, obviously, because we're not in the old studio system anymore, really, people don't get the connections that we got when we started, when we were when I was a assistant engineer, I wasn't even an assistant engineer. I was like a, T-boy at Beechwood Studios. And one of the first guys I got to work with was Dale Peters from the James Gang, the bass player from the James Gang. And he taught me one of the most valuable lessons I have learned my entire life in engineering. And that was, he said, here's the trick. Like when you're doing live sound or when you're working in the studio, put a low cut on everything except the bass and the kick drum. You know what I mean? It's like if you do that, you're going to make it work really well, because he says most of what you're fighting when you're mixing is masking.
That's right.
And what you're doing if you allow low end rumble into things, it causes the speakers to just kind of wiggle, you know what I mean?
Right.
And you won't get the kind of excursion you need to get things to sound punchy, you know what I mean? Have that kick drum push air, you know? And so he was like, and that stuff made so much sense to me. It's like, speakers are only 25% efficient. That's the worst thing you're dealing with in the studio.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's like, don't make your speakers work unnecessarily, get stuff out of the way of other stuff, So it's like, if your guitar doesn't need to have anything over, 8K, well, roll it off.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's like, if it's an electric guitar, I mean, really its effective range is, 150 Hertz to like 5K, you know what I mean? Is kind of the effective range, you know what I mean? And so it's like, if you want to have more buzzsaw kind of stuff, you open it up to 8K or whatever. And that kind of thing. Cause you can always do that stuff, but it's like the thing of like concentrating your instruments, just like when you're orchestrating something. And it's like, if you have a bassoon and your cello is playing the same line, you know what I mean? It's going to get muddier, you know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, and sometimes that's great, you know what I mean? But it's like, think about your timbres, think about the inversions of the chords.
Exactly.
And do things like that. If you want something to stand out, have a woodwind do it an octave higher, or, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like that kind of stuff,
Right.
And that's the basic thing about producing too. It's like, it's like if you're going to have all your keyboards and all your guitars all in the same octave range, you're just going to get mud, you know what I mean? So it's like, and that's and like, you don't know that, like, you know what I mean? Like when you're a kid, like a young musician, you have no idea about that stuff. So it's like, someone has to teach you, someone has to do, and we can take our knowledge. It's like, to be able to take lessons from Toby would be freaking amazing. You know what I mean? Like all the things that you've learned, all that, it's like, if I was a young musician engineer coming up, like now, like instead of like when I did, it's like I would be writing on Instagram or whatever to every producer that I really dig, to every engineer I really dig, and say like, could I get an hour with you, like to just kind of like glean some info, and we could talk about maybe what you think is important, that you want to give me a tip or trick, or whether you want to start it with like, what do you do on the mix bus? Why do you do that stuff on the mix bus? I mean, that stuff's super important, right? So I just thought I'm going to just open that up to people and let them come in and do that,
That's
and
fabulous.
I, every time I work with someone like in that way, I learn almost as much as they do. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
It's a win-win.
Sure.
Right. Right.
Yeah, totally.
Yep. So
Do you have
my
any
thing is
bucket list art? Oops, sorry.
bucket list artists.
Sorry, don't worry. That's Karen.
Oh,
yeah. Have you any artists that you'd really, really like to work with?
I would really like to maybe work with Jonesy from Sigur Rós.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
I'm just a real big fan. of his stuff. And I think it'd be cool, like just to kind of do some like soundtrack thing or something with him, like just to see. I'd love to see how he works and then see what that does with the two of us.
Right.
But I don't really have a lot of bucket list artist stuff. I always find that almost every artist I work with brings something to the table that is fascinating to me, and I learn so much from everyone, you know.
Right.
You know, I really have not had many bad experiences, to be honest. Like many experiences where I'm like, well, that was a waste of time, whatever.
Right.
You know, it's all interesting. You know what I mean?
And you learn something new from each one, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you learn and just dealing with, you know how it is. You sit down with an artist, you start talking to them about something, and now you've opened up empathy in your brain, and now you're thinking a little bit like they're thinking, and you've never thought that way before.
Right.
You know, like I've never thought the way I think now that I'm thinking through his lens, you know what I mean? Or whatever, or her lens.
Exactly.
And so now I've become someone new and more interesting to me, even. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, and
it's a great deal of value in that.
Yeah, when you really listen to people, which I mean, a lot of people don't listen to people; they just think about what they're going to say next, you know. But if you actually listen to them and then consider it, and then how you can do that, or what you could do to make that, and if you're not intimidated by it, then it opens whole new avenues of expression.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
So what's next for Sean and 8mm?
We are starting to work on a new record right now, actually. We've got four songs partially in the can.
Cool.
I'm kind of waiting on Juliet to do her, you know, big picture cinematic lyric thing.
Okay.
And I don't usually get into the lyrics. I mean, sometimes if a melody comes up and it's getting me and I'm like, okay, I got to sing this melody in so I don't forget it or whatever. And I'll come up with some lyrics that way, you know, and I've done some songs where, you know, but most of the time I like her to set the tone, especially when we're first starting on a record.
Right.
I like the basic tone to be her ideas lyrically, because she's just a better writer than I am. She's, you know, because like I'm more of a confessional writer. I write what's kind of in my mind, thinking whatever, and she's a storyteller. Like, you know, she'll be in a coffee shop and watch a table over and someone's talking whatever, and she's made up an entire world that's going on with this person.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that like Bruce Springsteen does. You know what I mean? And to me, those are the greatest writers, you know, the people that can really put themselves in someone else's shoes and then really write from that perspective.
Exactly.
That's the kind of storytelling I really, really like. And there's so much longevity to it. And that's what Juliet does great. And then I edit her pretty well from that, you know, so we work well together like that. So right now she's finishing up a movie script that she's doing. And then once that's done, it should be done this week. Then we'll start working on the lyrics. So
that's great.
Which is where all the cool stuff comes from, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's really dark and trippy, very cinematic. We're using a lot of the ideas that we do that are more kind of atonal ideas sonically. A lot of synthesizer stuff that I'm doing that doesn't sound like big 80s synths or anything, but it's more like kind of wacky and more atmospheric, kind of like the song on our last record, Move With Me, the way it starts, because it's like got a 2.5 minute intro of like, you know, just cool cinematic landscape, and that we're kind of doing a lot of that kind of vibe, and I'm really interested to see where she takes it with the melody and the lyric.
Right. That's always the best part.
Nice. Very, very much looking forward to that.
Yeah. Cool. It's going to be fun.
Much looking forward to that.
I think, Gareth, you'll definitely dig the vibe of what's going on with this stuff.
I can't wait to hear it either.
I'm very much looking forward to that, and I would also like sort of to say that as a massive Sigur Rós and Jónsi fan, I would absolutely love to hear a collaboration between you and him. That would definitely be ka-ching, in, you know, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a question there is a question that we always ask to kind of finish things off here at Actually My Right Stuff, and that would be, what are your superpowers or hidden talents? Because we actually know what it is you're known for, but what things have you got kind of ticking on in sort of the background?
I am a fix-it guy. I can fix anything, pretty much. I'm
Nice.
one of those guys that my dad, when I was a young man, my dad was always like, there are certain things that a man needs to know how to do, and so it was like,
Nice.
he made me apprentice with a carpenter. Like, I think I started when I was 10 years old, and I worked summers with him, and so he taught me how to do everything with a circular saw and a speed square. My dad
awesome.
taught me. Yeah, my dad taught me everything about electrical, like how to wire houses, how to rewire houses, all the kind of codes on that, how to sweat pipes and do plumbing, and how to know when not to do plumbing, which is a big deal.
That's a very big one as well.
You don't want to do this, yeah,
not.
But I can pretty much do anything. Yeah, it's like fixing, there's a squeak in the dryer, or the oven stops lighting, oven stops heating up or whatever. I can pretty much take it apart and fix it.
That's awesome.
So
nice.
I like doing
that's
that.
a very, very handy
and
skill
it comes
to
in
have.
handy in the studio, obviously. Like,
That's right.
all of a sudden this preamp's not working now, and it's like, oh, I got to change out the capacitors. The capacitor's bad or whatever.
And you get down to it, don't you?
Yes, you do. Especially when you have a console.
Exactly. You heat up a soldering iron and go to work. Maybe not right
then. When I had the old knee.
Exactly. Maybe not right then. You just change the module to the other slot, where you need it. And then later on, when everybody's gone, you go in there and figure out what capacitor needs to be changed, etc.
Exactly. Yeah. How many times have you just sat there and go,
oh, I can't even count them. Thousands. Thousands, because I worked at Cherokee for a long time. We had 4 of the 11 A-range consoles in the whole world. And so that was a lot of fun. And I really, that was my maintenance career, basically, where I learned how to fix everything. And then down to the component level, and then I, you would go in and you troubleshoot shit and get, keep the studio and the client going. And, that was my job for a while. It was fun. I had a really good time.
Those Tridents were so amazing.
I have 10 right here. You're listening to my voice through one right now.
Right now. Yeah, the Tridents were great. That was like Flood's favorite console too.
Yeah, they're the
Trident
faves.
A-range. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they're great.
Well, Sean,
I love that room in Cherokee.
Oh God,
such a good room.
They were all amazing, but they're gone now. Every single one of them. Oh well.
Well.
It's crazy.
Move along. Sean, this has been a really super cool and really informative episode. And I really, really enjoyed all the wisdom and the stories you shared here today. It was fun and exciting. And I hope to do another follow-up, because it sounds like we can keep going. And I thank you for taking the time to be part of My Right Stuff.
Thank you. I really enjoyed being on My Right Stuff. It was awesome. Thank you so much.
Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you, my actual kind of fellow Welshman. It has been, like I said, my actual kind of inner sort of teenage music fan is like, oh my god. But actually, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm kind of lost, like, sort of for words, which doesn't happen very often, as Toby will, as actually sort of Toby will tell you.
Right.
So I just want to say thank you very much. Good night, and nos da, you lovely people, and we'll catch you soon.
Well, thank you, Gareth, and Sean as well. And I'm your host, Lord Rage Wright. And this has been another informative and very musical and fun episode of My Right Stuff. Remember to listen loud, play hard, and keep reaching for your dreams. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Do you suffer from insomnia, depression, or anxiety? Well, our sponsor, TAUMMHOMS, may be able to help you in these areas. TAUMMHOMS, a natural sleep and sound healing portal, helping people globally get to sleep faster and stay asleep for longer. And you can find this piece of gold at www.taumms.com. That's www.taummmhoms.com. Most of all, I'd like to thank all of you beautiful people who stream, download, watch, and support My Right Stuff. And please keep spreading the word, because we really, really appreciate it. Also, We now have a My Right Stuff store where you can pick up some lovely snazzy merch for those beautiful bodies. Just go to myrightstuff.com and click on the store tab. And don't forget to tag us in any photos of the merch so we can include you in a future episode. Please also be sure to subscribe to the podcast channel of your choice, as well as our YouTube channel. Toby says it'll give you 10 years good luck. I'm not so sure. I think it's maybe more. This has been another amazing episode of My Right Stuff, and please be sure to tune in this week, next week, and every week for yet another adventurous and informative show. I'm your co-host, Sir Gareth Dighton, and thank you, my lovelies, for tuning in. No star, you beautiful people, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for watching My Right Stuff. This episode was brought to you by TAUMMHOMS, a natural sleep and sound healing portal available globally at www.taumms.com. That's www.taummmhoms.com.